and welcome to our video on do not create a budget. Now you're thinking, wait a minute, why not? Everybody knows you're supposed to create a budget, right? Well, let me tell you why creating a budget doesn't work. When I got out of financial planning school, that's the first thing they tell you to do. You sit down with a client and you have them write down everything they spend their money on, and then you have all these expenses, and then you say how much can you save and where can we cut, and you go through that whole exercise. And what I found was that the client never followed through on what we said. It's kind of like saying, you know, here's what you need to do to get fit and lose weight. You need to work out and eat well, and you need to do all this. You create a whole plan, and then nobody follows it. Okay, so what I discovered was that creating a budget doesn't work. And you know why it doesn't? Because everything on there is stuff you want. It wouldn't be on there if you didn't want it. So to get you to give it up, it's like it's not going to happen. And the other problem you run into is if you have a husband and a wife, and the husband says something like, oh yeah, you should cut down on whatever expenditures you have, and then she goes, oh yeah, well you need to cut down on whatever you're doing. And then they get into an argument right there in front of you, and you're like, kids, stop it. So this whole budgeting thing, in my view, doesn't work. So here's how you do it. What you do is you do the same thing that the federal government does. Does the federal government actually ever ask you to send them a check for your taxes out of your paycheck? Has anybody ever seen that? Do you get that bill every month? No. You know why? They know that if they sent you a bill every month to collect on the taxes, they would never collect it. So what do? They take it out of your paycheck before you get your greedy little paws all over it. Well, that's smart. That's how they make sure they get their money. That's how you do the exact same thing. So what you do is you sit down, you develop your plan, and you decide how much do we need to set aside every month to achieve our financial goals, okay? Now, what you do then is you set up an auto deposit to your investment account for whatever that amount is. Now, here's what's going to happen. Rather than going through your budget and saying, we're not going to do this and we're not going to do that, what's going to happen is you'll still do everything you want. You just won't do as much of it, okay? So if we said, let's take 10% of your expenditures and put that into investments every month, then what that means is you're left with 90%. So what it means is you'll do 90% of the stuff you used to do instead of 100. So instead of eating out twice a month, you'll eat out once a month. Instead of renting 12 videos, you'll rent 7. You'll go to the movies twice instead of 4 times. You'll still do all the stuff you want. You'll just reduce the quantities that you were doing them in, and you won't miss it. I promise you won't miss it. So that, and I'll tell you, this happens in nature. If you look at sharks, okay? I learned this back in the days when Jaws was the big movie. You guys may remember that. We were in Florida, and they were fishing. These kids would actually swim out with the chum and catch the sharks. And I was like, these kids are going to get eaten alive. But they'd bring the sharks in, and there were all these baby sharks. This is kind of gross, sorry, but it was inside this pregnant shark, and they cut her open, and there were all the babies. So sorry for that. But anyway, the story is this. If you take one of the little baby sharks, they're only about this big when they come out. And by the way, they bite. They're dangerous. So you get these little sharks. If you take that little shark and you put him in a tank about this big, he will not grow bigger than the tank that he's in. He will not grow big enough to die. You take him out and you throw him in the swimming pool, and he'll grow big enough to live in the swimming pool, but not big enough to die. And then you take him out and throw him in the ocean, and he'll grow to full size. Your expenses do the exact same thing. They live within the size of the tank you give them. So your job is not to budget, it's to limit the size of the tank. If you take the money away from you before you have it to spend, the available dollars to spend are smaller, the tank is smaller, and guess what? You'll still do everything you love to do, you just won't do as much of it, and you won't miss it. Meanwhile, you're building up a nice nest egg for yourself, okay? So don't budget, reduce the size of the tank. Thanks for watching this video. Sorry for the gross part there, but I think it drew a picture for you. And there are lots of other great videos that I encourage you to watch. Go to moneymatters.net. You'll find them all there. And again, thanks for watching the video.